Pokemon Black and White are some of my favorite Pokemon games of all time, but the truth is, they are really difficult to Nuzlocke. With their limited regional decks and lack of diverse Pokemon found throughout a playthrough, I figured I'd embark on a huge challenge in today's video. To do this, I'll be attempting to beat Pokemon Black using only Dark types. As always, I'll be making this challenge even harder by adding on the hardcore Nuzlocke rules that you see on screen now. Seriously guys, this video was crazy, so I hope you enjoy. With all that out of the way though, I'm ready to get into this game, so I start out by naming myself Zango and pick a starter that I'll never be able to use. After getting Snivy, I can't actually get my real starter until after the first route, so after going through all this Ghetsis mumbo jumbo, I eventually make it to the second route where I can catch myself a Purloin. It took a minute to get this encounter, but eventually I did and caught her and gave her the nickname Pear. Looking at Purloin's nature, I find out that it's attack up and speed down, which is a brave nature, and this could actually be really bad. Purloin's best stat is speed, and with the nature bringing that down, I'm not really sure if I'll be able to outspeed all the Pokemon I need to. I will be dealing a little bit of extra damage though, which could become really useful later on. Along with that though, my ability is Unburdened, which could actually be insanely good for this first gym. This then brings me on to my first real fight against Bianca, and this one's pretty easy. All I've got to do is just spam Scratch until eventually both of her Pokemon go down. This then takes me into the first city, where my next fight is against Charon. He leads with Tepig, who I make pretty quick work of by going for a bunch of scratches, but eventually he gets off a ton of tail whips. He dies before doing any damage to me, but the next Pokemon Purloin gets sent in and does massive damage with a single scratch. Could have been bad for me, but at this point in the game, I really can't do much other than just spam moves, considering Purloin really isn't that strong of a Pokemon, and I don't really have that many moves to use. I'm not gonna lie to you guys, a lot of this early part of the game is entirely luck-based, as I have Fury Swipes, and it has a chance of hitting 2 to 5 times. Many of these early game fights require me to hit Fury Swipes at least 10 times per Pokemon, especially since my Purloin is just really weak. That all being said though, I can't really delay the inevitable anymore, and I've got to go fight my first gym battle. This one's up against Chili, and he leads with Lillipup as I bring out Pear. With Pear, I start out by going for a Fury Swipes, which actually does a lot of damage as it hits 5 times in a row. Lillipup then sets up a workup as I then start to just spam Growl as I'm trying to get him to use my item in Oranberry. Eventually, after Lillipup goes for enough bites, I'm eventually brought low enough to where my Oranberry is used, and that activates my ability Unburdened. This ability upgrades my speed stat and makes sure that I'll be able to outspeed Pansear. With that, I finish off the Lillipup with a couple more moves, as then the ace Pokemon Pansear is sent in. I start out with a Fury Swipes, which hits 3 times and gets 1 critical hit as Pansear then sets up a workup. On the next turn, I get another 5 Fury Swipes off as Pansear then goes for an Incinerate, taking me down to 13 HP remaining. Now, you'd think all it takes is 1 more Fury Swipes and I've won the battle, right? Unfortunately, this move has 80 accuracy, so of course, I end up missing, allowing Pansear to get off another Incinerate. Luckily for me though, this one is a slightly lower damage roll, which means I survive with literally 1 HP, but if I miss another Fury Swipes, it's over. Thankfully, I don't miss and I end up winning the battle, but geez, Fury Swipe sucks. Now, after beating this first gym, I walk outside and meet up with this doctor who gives me the HM for cut. I then pull my Snivy out of the box and break down this tree, which kinda just looks like a piece of food. Speaking of food, that reminds me of the sponsor of this video, Factor. Factor is one of the best meal kit services out there. Their easy to navigate website allows me to get good food whenever I'm hungry. Factor takes all the stress out of meal planning and sets me up for success, giving me more time to make more Pokemon videos. With 35 meals to choose from per week, Factor can get chef-prepared meals to your table in 2 minutes with their ready-to-eat meals. Factor is filled to the brim with options, and they're all super delicious. They have everything from breakfast to smoothies to even keto and calorie-smart options. Factor is extremely flexible and is keeping me fed this summer. Trust me guys, if you're looking for any meal kit service, Factor is definitely the one for you, as with Factor, you can rest assured knowing that you're making a sustainable choice. They offset 100% of delivery emissions and sources 100% renewable electricity for their production sites and offices. So seriously guys, what are you waiting for? Get 50% off of your first box and 20% of your next month orders using my link. Click the link in the description or scan the QR code with your phone. Seriously guys, you should really check out Factor, as not only are they supporting the channel, but they're looking to support you by keeping you fed this summer. Huge thanks to Factor for sponsoring this video, and with that, I've finally broken this tree and I'm ready to get back into the game. After getting through that tree, I find myself in the Dream Yard, where I meet up with Team Plasma that's beating up on this poor Muna. I then get to teach him a lesson by beating up on their Pokemon with my Pokemon. Thankfully, my Purloin is just better, and now I can just continue past them all the way to the 3rd route. Once I get here, I've unfortunately got to take Snivy out of the box yet again because I can't make it past these preschoolers because I don't have 2 Pokemon on my team. I beat those preschoolers up like I did Team Plasma, then continue on into a fight with Charon. Charon Charon's not as scary as he was last time, but I definitely need a new Pokemon on my team soon because Purloin just is not it. With that being said though, I go on to fight more Team Plasma, and I almost died to one of these members, getting brought down to 8 HP. Yeah, those fights were definitely a little bit scary, but eventually I did make it through them all, and I actually decided to stay in this cave for a little bit longer, running around back and forth until eventually I found some gems. These gems should definitely help me out a ton later on in this run, as I don't have access to that many Pokemon, and I also don't have access to that many good moves. Regardless, continuing on into Nacre City leads me into a fight with N, where his team has 3 Pokemon on it. That's not even really the most difficult part about it, it's that he has a Timber with low kick. Now the first time I tried to go through this fight, all I had was a normal gem on Fury Swipes, and it just did not hit enough times, and I got killed by 2 low kicks. This led me to have to make an entirely new save and reset the run to get back to this point to try to fight N again with the exact same strategy. This time though, the only difference was I got a little bit more lucky, hit a few more Fury Swipes, and eventually N's Timber went down along with his Timpole, which won me the fight. Now that that's out of the way though, I can head on into the second gym where I evolve my Purloin into a Light Bard and get ready to fight Lenora in my second gym battle. Lenora leads this fight with Herdier as I bring out my only Pokemon, Light Bard. Herdier's ability is Intimidate, so he gets that off immediately, which lowers my attack by 1 stage as I then go for a Fury Swipes that's gem boosted. During this Fury Swipes, I ended up hitting 5 times in a row, which is really solid, and I got a critical hit. This allowed me to do just enough damage to take out Herdier with a single Fury Swipes and brought out the final Pokemon Watchog relatively easily. Now I'm still at -1 attack from that earlier Intimidate, but it really shouldn't matter that much as I've got a lot of health remaining and I can just slowly go for a couple of moves to eventually finish off this Watchog. This fight really did get scary at the end though, as after Lenora healed up with a Super Potion, I didn't really know what to do. Thankfully I did get lucky with my Fury Swipes and was able to beat Lenora, getting my second badge. As soon as that fight is done, I walk outside and witness Team Plasma steal this Dragonite head, and I still don't really know to this day why they did this, but I think they got the wrong dragon type. Regardless, I get to make my way through them to eventually get the head back and move on to this massive bridge where I eventually make it to the end and find myself in Castelia City. Heading north from the city leads me on into Route 4 where I can finally catch myself another Pokemon. Thankfully, this one ended up being a Scraggy, which is exactly what I wanted for this third gym. Scraggy's got a serious nature, which is okay, but he's also got the ability Moxie, which could be huge for the run. I give him the nickname Apple, then I've got to deal with a little bit more of Team Plasma because apparently they stole Bianca's Pokemon, and it's like, how did you even let them do that, Bianca? Regardless, I beat them really easily, then I'm able to simply just go and fight Berg for my third badge. He leads the fight with Whirlipede as I decide to lead with my Light Bard. I start with a fake out, flinching Whirlipede and doing about a third because of my normal gem. At this point, I kind of just start to spam Sand Attack until eventually Whirlipede hits me with a critical hit Poison Tail and poisons me, so I've definitely got to switch out. I move into Scraggy, starting to set up workup until eventually I get enough off feeling confident to go for a headbutt, but unfortunately I got a low damage roll, so I don't kill Whirlipede. It's fine though, as 2 more headbutts are able to do the trick, finishing off Whirlipede and bringing out the ace Pokemon Leavanny. Leavanny hits pretty hard and is able to get off a Razor Leaf, taking me down to 28 remaining as I then go for a payback. Because this payback hits after Leavanny has already hit me, it does double damage and it also gets that Dark Gem boost, which means I'm easily able to OHKO. Lastly is the final Pokemon Dwebble, and for this I'm simply just able to go for a single Brick Break and it kills, winning me my third badge. With that gym all cleaned up, I get to go back to Route 4 where I've got another 2 rival battles to go through against Bianca and Charon. This first one's up against Bianca, and with my new member Scraggy on the team, this is actually a really easy battle. This next one, Charon, though, does get a little bit harder, especially since it's in the desert and Sandstorm will be active throughout the entire fight. The biggest problem is Pignite, who would have Arm Thrust at this level, but for some reason he just decides not to use it, or maybe he doesn't have it. I'm not really sure what his plan is. Either way, I'm not complaining as it leads me on further into Route 4 where I find the TM for Dig, and I also find myself in the Desert Resort. In this place, I can obtain another Pokemon, and this one ends up being a Sandile that I catch and nickname Orange. This Sandile has Moxie, which I honestly would have preferred Intimidate, but either way I guess it's fine because Moxie is still a really good ability. On top of that, I also have a Jolly nature, and I guess all's well that ends well because Jolly is the best nature I could have had on this thing. Now it's time for me to head into what's one of my favorite cities of the run so far, Nimbasa City. Nimbasa has me fight a quick fight against Team Plasma where I end up earning myself a bicycle, and the bicycle music in this game is just so good. Listen to this. With that, the next thing I do is head into Bianca's little pageant thing where I end up dressing up my Scraggy, and just look at how cute he looks. It's after this though that Bianca's day of reckoning finally comes and her dad tells her to go home on the journey, and honestly I agree with him. I don't think a 10-year-old should be out here at all. Unfortunately, Bianca ends up staying on the trip because Elisa convinces her dad that he's actually wrong and he's the selfish one. Yeah, not really sure how that works, but regardless, after this, N ends up inviting me on this Ferris wheel, little amusement park date, and I'm not really sure how I feel about this. It's a little weird. On top of that though, he ends up fighting me to impress his friends, and it's like, dude, what are we even doing? Still, I just make quick work of him, allowing myself to head into the 4th gym and fight the 4th gym leader, Elisa. Elisa leads the fight with her Emolga as I lead with Pear. Emolga starts out by going for her Volt Switch, bringing me down to 53 as I then set up a Hone Claws. With this second Emolga in, she immediately goes for a Volt Switch, switching out into the original Emolga, who then gets hit by a Thief that's Dark Gym boosted, so it's enough to kill. My Liepard did get paralyzed by static, and even though my Unburdened was activated, it doesn't really matter because I could still get paralyzed and I'm way too scared, so I just switch. I switch in Scraggy, who gets hit by a Volt Switch, as then Emolga gets swapped out for Zebstrika. With Zebstrika in, to avoid getting hit by yet another Volt Switch, I decide to move into my Sandile, who has access to Dig and is a ground type, so he won't get hit by any electric type moves. This allows me to get off a clean Dig, and with it being ground gem boosted, it's enough to one-shot the Zebstrika, giving me a Moxie boost going into the final Pokemon Emolga. Emolga did end up scaring me a little bit by hitting a critical hit Aerial Ace, which brought my Sandile down into the red, but I did end up surviving and got off a clean Assurance, which is enough to kill Emolga and win me my 4th badge. Now we get to head towards what is possibly the best city in all of Pokemon, Driftvale City. Unfortunately though, on my way there, I've got yet another rival battle with Sharon. My team is a way higher level than his right now, so it's not really too big of a deal, but these rival fights are getting to me, man. There are so many of them. With that, I get the pleasure of beating up on some more 6-year-olds until eventually I see these Driftvale Drawbridge. Oh my gosh, that's a tongue twister. I see this Driftvale Drawbridge drop, and I get to go into Driftvale City. Once I'm here, you know I gotta bask in the music for just a second, because it's peak, and then I head into the cold storage where I find a bunch of Team Plasma members. These members are a lot easier to deal with than they were before because I have Scraggy on the team, and they have a lot of normal and dark types. That being said, they aren't much of a challenge, and after defeating them, I get to go to the 5th gym. Before starting my battle with him, I end up evolving my Sandile into a Krokorok, then after starting my battle, I lead with Scraggy as he leads with a Krokorok of his own. Thankfully, this Krokorok doesn't have Intimidate, so I don't need to worry about that as he hits me with the Torment, and I'm easily able to go for a super effective Brick Break, which is enough to OHKO. Now at +1, because of my Moxie boost, the next Pokemon to get sent in is Palpitoad, and this one's definitely a little bit more bulky, and I don't have a super effective move for this thing. So I decide to take a little bit of a risk and go for a high jump kick, which is 130 base power, but if I end up missing the move, I take half of my health and recoil damage. Luckily, I do end up landing the hit, smacking Palpitoad into next week and bringing me into the final Pokemon, Excadrill. At +2, I'm pretty confident I can just kill with a Brick Break, and Excadrill ends up making it really easy for me as he just sets up a Hone Claws. This gives me a free turn to get off that Brick Break, taking down Excadrill and winning myself my 5th badge. Now I've got another rival battle with Bianca, but thankfully this one's yet another easy one as I kind of just spam Brick Break. After this, I go to Chargestone Cave where Clay ends up letting me in, and I meet up with these Nugget brothers, and these guys are pretty cool. They just like nuggets, and I think that's kind of sick. Past them is a fight with N, and since he has all the Pokemon in this cave, and most of them are weak to fighting type moves, all I've got to do is spam Brick Break yet again. With N defeated, I'm able to walk out of this cave and go into Mistralton City. Here, I meet up with Skyla, who tells me to go to the top of Celestial Tower, where I find this massive bell. You see, I was gonna put some cringy, go subscribe and hit the notification bell thing right here, but I'd rather not. I'd rather just let you guys know that my goal for this year is to hit 100k subs, and if you're enjoying, leaving a like, commenting, subscribing would really help out the channel a ton. Regardless of all that though, now I can head towards the 6th gym where I'm ready to fight Skyla for my badge. So after getting a bunch of brain damage by flying back and forth in these cannons, I fight Skyla and she leads the fight with Swoobat as I lead with my Liepard. I start out by going for a simple fake out, doing about a third as Swoobat on the next turn then sets up Amnesia. This raises her special defense, but thankfully Assurance isn't a special attacking move, so after going for it, it does just enough damage to finish her off. Next out is Unpheasant, who starts out by getting hit by an Assurance, doing almost half as I then get hit by a Leer, lowering my defense by 1 stage. On the next turn, another Assurance takes Unpheasant down into the red, and then she tries to set up a Razor Wind. Thankfully, this Razor Wind locks her in for the next turn, which means I can just go for yet another Assurance, and that takes her down. With that, the final Pokemon Swanna gets sent in, who starts out by getting hit by an Assurance, doing almost half as she then hits me with an Aerial Ace, taking me down to 60. On the next turn, a second Assurance takes her down into the red as she then sets up an Aqua Ring. It's at this point that she kinda just spams healing items until eventually I take her down into the red and she gets to stay there. This does mean I have to potentially risk a crit here because I can't switch into Krokorok because of Bubble Beam, and I can't switch into Scraggy because of Aerial Ace. Thankfully, my Liepard takes an Aerial Ace without a crit, and that allows me to finish off Swanna on the next turn, winning me badge number 6. It's after this fight that I'm on to what's one of my final rival battles against Charon, and he leads with Unpheasant as I lead with Scraggy. Now this is a bad lead, and the only reason I did this was because I forgot the rival battle was even here. Regardless, at the end of the day, his team still does kinda suck, so I am able to beat it with no issues. That takes me into Twisted Mountain, which is certainly a twisted place because I could not get through here for the life of me. I was stuck in here so long, my Scraggy ended up evolving into a Scrafty. I eventually make it to the end and into Icarus City, where I can challenge the 7th gym leader Bryson right away. Now with the new team member, this gym shouldn't be a problem whatsoever because ice types really don't like strong fighting types. That being said, Bryson leads with Vanillish as I lead with Scrafty. With Scrafty, I get to go for just one Brick Break as that one-shots the Happy Ice Cream Cone and gives me a Moxie boost going into the next Pokemon, Beartic. Beartic is a lot more bulky than Vanillish, but because I have that +1 Moxie boost, I am able to one-shot with just a single Brick Break. This then leads into the final Pokemon, Cryogonal, and at +2, I'm easily able to melt this Snowflake and win myself my 7th badge. After getting that gym badge, I've got to go to the Dragon Spiral Tower to stop Team Plasma. I'm not really 100% sure what I need to do in this place, but I do know that something is going wild at the top of the tower. As I'm heading up, I evolve my Krokorok into a Krookodile, and then I get jumped by 4 Team Plasma members, and this just does not seem like a fair fight. A fair fight for them, obviously, because they suck, and I beat them really easily. At the top of the tower, I figure out that it's just N, and he starts whining about, you know, Pokemon stuff. I don't really care. From there, I take my best starter out of the box again, and use him to fly over to Nimbasa City, so I can go to Relic Castle, where there are a ton of Team Plasma members waiting for me. Once I get to the bottom, I find out that Ghetsis is there. Fortunately, I'm glad I don't have to fight him, as I'd probably lose, but I then go to Nacre City, where I get myself the Light Stone. This might have been useful if Reshiram was a dark type, but he's not, so this doesn't really do anything for me. Regardless, it does progress the story, and allows me to have my final rival battle against Bianca. I hate to glance over these rival fights, but Bianca's really not a problem for me. I mean, my team is pretty well equipped to deal with all of her Pokemon, even though I only have 3 of my own. It's after this fight that I can now freely head into Opelucid City, where I see one more Ghetsis little propaganda speech and get ready to challenge the 8th and final gym. Before fighting this gym though, I can actually get 2 new Pokemon on my team. The first Pokemon I'm allowed to get is a Pawniard that I find on Route 9. I catch him, give him the nickname Kiwi, then move on to the next route where I can find a Vullaby. Vullaby was a pretty easy catch, and I ended up nicknaming her Pineapple. Now both of these Pokemon I just caught, Pawniard and Vullaby, don't actually evolve until level 52 and 54 respectively. This means that I won't even have the potential of getting these 2 evolutions until during the Elite Four, and I probably won't get Vullaby at all. Either way, this doesn't really mean much right now, but in the future, it might get a little rough. I'm getting sidetracked though, and now I'm ready to fight Drayden for my final gym badge. Drayden leads the fight with Fracture, as I lead with my Krookodile. With Krookodile, I start by going for a Crunch, which does about 2/3, as Fracture then sets up a Dragon Dance. At this point, I likely still outspeed, but instead of going for another Crunch, I decided to go for a Dig because I had really low PP. At the end of the day, this still really didn't matter, as I was able to finish off Fracture's remaining health with a Dig, and at this point, he brings out his Druddigon. Druddigon falls to the exact same strategy I used for Fracture, just a simple Crunch and a Dig combo, and this leads Drayden onto his final Pokemon, Haxorus. Against Haxorus, I'm already at +2 because of my Moxie boost, and with just one Crunch, I'm able to take him down. This wins me my final gym badge of this run. Now, Professor Junifer ends up handing me a Master Ball, which I can use to catch any Pokemon ever. It kind of feels a little unsafe to give this to a 10-year-old, but whatever. From here, I got my final fight with Charon, and this is another easy one. I mean, all I do is just sweep with Krookodile, basically the same thing I did with Drayden. Once that's completed, I can eventually go through Victory Road and make it to the Pokemon League. Once I get here, before starting my Elite Four journey, I decide to upgrade my team just a little bit and head back into Victory Road so I can catch myself a Dino. I give him the nickname Banana, then evolve him into a Zualas, but I can't actually evolve him into a Dragon because that's at level 64. With that, I run around back and forth in Victory Road for a little bit to eventually gather up some gems that I might be able to use for this Elite Four. Now, the only thing left for me to do is bring my team up to the level cap, fix my movesets a little bit, and start the Elite Four. For my first battle against the Elite Four, I decided to go up against Chantal. She leads this fight with Cofagrigus as I lead with my Krookodile. I start out by going for a Crunch, doing a ton of damage to her, taking her down into the red as she then misses a Will-O-Wisp. On the next turn, Chantal ends up healing, but it doesn't really matter at this point as I get to just spam Crunch until eventually Jellicent gets sent in. With Jellicent in, I start with a classic Crunch that's able to one-shot and take out the third Pokemon, Golurk. You'd think Golurk Golurk would be a little bit bulky enough to survive a crunch, but you'd definitely be wrong, as I'm able to one-shot both Golurk and the Chandelure that comes after her, and that ends up winning me my first Elite Four battle. For my next fight, I decided to take another easy one by going up against Caitlyn and her Psychic types. Caitlyn leads the fight with Ranunculus, as I lead with Orange. My damage calculator said that this Ranunculus had a 10% chance of surviving a crunch, so I decided to go for it, and I got really unlucky. She then survives on what's probably 1 HP, as she then goes for a Focus Blast, and this could be the end of my Crocodile. Thankfully though, my Crocodile is a beast, as he ends up surviving this Focus Blast with only 8 HP left. At this point, Caitlyn is forced to heal, so I'm able to get off 2 consecutive crunches, finishing off the Ranunculus and getting myself a Moxie boost. With my attack being at +1 and Caitlyn having 0 priority moves, I'm able to outspeed and one-shot every single one of her remaining Pokemon. This ends up winning me my second Elite Four battle, but definitely not without its ups and downs. Next up, I've got fellow Dark-type user, Elite Four member Grimsley. He leads with Scrafty, as I decide to lead with a Scrafty of my own. Now, Scrafty's a pretty bulky mon, so rather than going for a Brick Break, I decided to take the risk and go for a high jump kick that thankfully does land and is able to one-shot. With that, Grimsley sends in his next Pokemon, Liepard, who has Aerial Ace, so this could get a little messy. Thankfully, like I mentioned earlier, Scrafty's a pretty bulky mon, so I'm able to tank an Aerial Ace, and because I'm at that +1 for Moxie, I'm also able to one-shot Liepard with a Brick Break. This then brings in Bisharp, who's 4 times weak to any fighting move I throw at him, but the problem with that is he also has Aerial Ace. Scrafty though just keeps proving why he's the GOAT, and he absolutely eats an Aerial Ace from Bisharp and is able to get off a Brick Break, which is 4 times super effective. This then leads into the last Pokemon, Crocodile, and at this point I'm definitely too low to stay in, so I decided to switch out into Liepard. I did this just to get a little bit of chip damage and also bait out an Earthquake so I can get a free switch into my Vullaby. Vullaby doesn't really do a lot of damage, but does just enough for me to feel safe to switch into my Crocodile and potentially go for a Dig to kill. Now I was pretty confident I could outspeed because of my nature, but after going for a Dig, I realized I had made a huge mistake. Earthquake is one of the only moves in the game that can hit me while I'm underground. This means I take some massive damage and I'm left with just 4 HP remaining before getting up with the Dig and finishing off this Crocodile. With a higher damage roll there, I definitely would have died, so I'm really glad I get to keep the run going, as Crocodile is basically the only thing that'll win me this game. Either way, with that finished, I'm able to go into my last Elite Four battle against the fighting type user Marshall. Now just before going into this fight, I gave basically every single one of my Pokemon Aerial Ace. This should help me a lot, as it gives me a super effective move to use against these fighting types. Marshall leads the fight with Throw, as I decide to bring out Liepard. With Liepard, I obviously start out by going for a Fake Out just to get a little chip damage, and I then go for an Aerial Ace, which takes Throw down to about half. I then get pretty lucky and I end up avoiding an attack, as on the next turn, rather than going for another Aerial Ace, I decided to go for a Night Slash. Truthfully, the reason I did this was pretty simple, I just didn't want Throw to end up healing. Now that I've done that though, I can get a switch into Pineapple, who gets hit by a Storm Throw on the switch in, but on the next turn I do outspeed and I'm able to set up a Tailwind. Unfortunately for me, this does mean I have to sack Pineapple as she gets hit by a Stone Edge, and that's definitely gonna kill. Thankfully though, this sacrifice will definitely not be in vain, as I get a free switch into my Crocodile now, and I can kill with a Dig. With Throwdown, I get to go into what's possibly one of the bulkiest mons in this entire Elite Four, and that's Conkeldurr. Even at +1 attack, I normally don't kill this thing, but thankfully I did add a Flying Gem onto Crocodile, so it'll be able to do just enough damage to get an Oko. With that, because of the Tailwind I set up earlier, I'm able to outspeed the rest of Marshall's Pokemon and go for a couple more Aerial Aces to finish them all off and win myself my final Elite Four battle. Now, all I've got left are N and Ghetsis. They end up blowing the top off of this Elite Four journey and summoning their massive castle out of just nowhere. Not really sure where it came from, but it's definitely something, as I walk through a bunch of these different rooms, get a couple of rare candies, and use them on my Pokemon just before my fight with N. These rare candies I used to get myself a Bisharp at level 52, and in my fight against N, he leads with Zekrom as I lead with Crocodile. Thankfully, because I'm obviously a ground type, Zekrom really isn't too difficult to deal with, and after just 2 digs, he goes down. He did end up landing a Giga Impact, which brought me down to 84 remaining, but it really doesn't matter at this point, as I outspeed basically every single one of N's remaining Pokemon. On top of that though, I get my Moxie boost after every KO, and I also learn the move Earthquake, which means I'm going to be doing a ton of damage to every single one of his Pokemon. I do, unfortunately though, have to report a sacrifice that I did make throughout the fight, and that's switching into Liepard to break this Caracosta's Sturdy. Unfortunately for Liepard, I needed the free switch to get back into Crocodile so I can start spamming Earthquakes again, but he will be missed. He was one of the most clutch members in this entire run. Either way, like I said, after a couple more Earthquakes, I was able to beat N and bring me into my final fight against Ghetsis. Ghetsis leads with this Cavagrigus as I lead with Crocodile. Against Cavagrigus, I start start out by going for a crunch, which almost kills, taking him down into the red as he then misses a toxic. At this point, Ghetsis just uses all his full restores, allowing me to KO with a couple more crunches, bringing out Hydreigon. Now this right here is an illegal Hydreigon. Hydreigon usually evolves at level 64, but this is level 54, so he shouldn't have this Pokemon. He cheated. With Hydreigon almost guaranteed to go for Focus Blast, I decided to switch into Kiwi just to see it die. Honestly, Kiwi's not really useful for this fight, so there it goes. This then gives me a free switch into Scrafty, where I just have to hope Hydreigon misses, and he actually does, allowing me to get off a high jump kick, which is enough to one-shot. Now, with that Moxie boost starting to come in, I get to take out Bouffalant with a single Brick Break, and the next Pokemon that comes out, Electros, also goes down, this time to a high jump kick. Now, at this point, I really don't need to be going for high jump kick anymore, but you gotta risk it for the biscuit, and I just decided to keep it going, one-shotting Seismitoad with yet another high jump kick. With the rest of the run behind us, I'm ready to fight the final Pokemon, Bisharp. As we all can assume, a quad super effective Brick Break would have definitely killed, but at this point it's about the principle, and I decide to go for a high jump kick anyways, and of course, Scrafty's the GOAT, he lands it, and I win this run. Thank you all for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please consider leaving a like and subscribing, as it really does help out the channel, and I'm trying to hit 100k by the end of the year. With all that out of the way though, I'll see you guys in the next one.